Week 4 of the NFL season is here. We got another 16 games to go through. Last week, 9 wins, 7 incorrect. So I think we could have done better, but I'm still fairly positive. I'm positive for this year, so that's good. But I'm guessing another week of unpredictable games is about to happen. Games that are supposed to be sure are going to go the opposite way, and everything else, because in the NFL, the parity is strong. It's about as strong as it's ever been, and it's a really good thing to see. Yeah, it does make it harder to predict, but it is still fun nonetheless. So let me know what you think down below, and let's go through game by game as always. Starting with our first game of the week, the Giants and the Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys are coming off a big beatdown last week. Yes, they did make a run at the end because the Baltimore Ravens similarly collapsed like they do all the time. And the Giants had a big win over Cleveland. Now, Daniel Jones, let's admit he's been a little better than we thought he would be this year. Larger part because Malik Neighbors is just that fantastic of a wide receiver and bringing the level of his quarterback up. Although usually it is the quarterback that raises the level of everybody around him, it seems this time it's definitely Malik Neighbors raising up Daniel Jones, because we all know Daniel Jones is not a great quarterback, but Malik Neighbors makes it possible to really be better than what he actually is. Now, the Cowboys, I don't know what to think about them. They had 2 straight losses. Yes, they made a comeback last week, but their team just isn't great. They're missing players on defense for sure. Their offense is just not the same. CeeDee Lamb has just not been the same guy. I mean, who would have thought holding out of most of training camp for a big contract would slow you down a little bit? I think this might be the week where he gets going, but it is in New York. But interesting note, the Cowboys have won 13 of the last 14 games against the Giants. So even though the Giants have been better, I'm going to give the win to the Dallas Cowboys. Probably around 24-21. Yeah, it's going to be a somewhat close game, but ultimately, and I probably see Daniel Jones throwing an interception at the end, and Dallas walking away with the win and getting back to 500. But again, their prospects so far for the Cowboys this year are not looking good, so they need to get much better ASAP. Next, another divisional matchup between Atlanta and New Orleans. Now, Atlanta are coming off another loss where allegedly the NFL cheated for the Chiefs, which, they probably did, because that's just the Chiefs are the new Patriots. The Chiefs get all the calls, and the team they're playing just doesn't. We have New Orleans. Oh, watching that game last week was frustrating in the end, but as expected, I did warn you in my preview video that Derek Carr looked really good the first 2 weeks, but is this the real Derek Carr? The real Derek Carr is going to show up where he has a couple good games and then he just does nothing. And that certainly showed up last week, and with a game-ending interception. And it doesn't help when Eric McCoy, your center, goes out right away. I mean, that really unraveled the Saints for the day. Not to mention the spitting on players, which is not cool at all. Don't do it. It's wrong. Why are you spitting on players? We're not Warren Sapp and other players like that. Not Warren Sapp, Bill Romanowski out there. But should be an evenly matched game. These two always give it their best. It's always usually really close. Kirk Cousins probably still not the healthiest. And the Saints, as long as they can keep running the ball, they should be pretty good. But they weren't able to run at all last week again, which is probably a large part due to Eric McCoy being out. So we'll see if he's even able to return. I haven't even heard if he's actually going to be able to play this week. In Atlanta, the jury's still out. Their defense played pretty well, but their offense has still been kind of pedestrian. And Bijan Robinson, for all the hyped up that he's been getting, he has not been able to find as many holes as he should. He should be racking up close to 100 yards a game, but last week he just couldn't do it. I mean, the Chiefs' defense is no slouch, but it's not that great either against the run. Should have been able to get at least 100 yards last week, I would have thought, but it didn't happen. So look for Bijan to have a big game this week. Look for Derek Carr to have a bounce back game this week. Come Kamara similarly should have a decent game this week. It's all going to come down to defense, like always. And whoever gets the most turnovers wins the game. I'm going to pick the Saints because they normally win in this instance. I know it's in Atlanta, but I think the Saints win 27 to 23. Going to be close, but I think it comes down to a Kirk Cousins interception at the end. Like the game before, somebody's going to throw an interception and someone is going to lose as a result of it. Next, the Rams versus the Bears. Another interesting matchup. The Rams with that big comeback last week. The Bears looking absolutely terrible. I mean, their defense wasn't bad last week, but their offense could not get anything going. If the Bears lose again this week, which right now I'm thinking they're going to win, you really start to wonder about Caleb Williams because he certainly has an arm and he certainly can make plays with his feet, but he doesn't make the best decisions. He throws interceptions around like fucking candy, and that offensive line is truly dreadful. I said this in the beginning of the year that the Bears' offensive line is not good. People think, oh, we weren't that bad last year. It's like, no, your offensive line is terrible. I mean, normally the Bears' rushing attack is near the top 5 of the league at this point, but it's not. It's nowhere near it. They haven't been able to get anything going on the ground whatsoever. And the Rams, sure, Puka Nacua and Kupp are still out, but I mean, give it to them for last week. Who knows if it was a function of them playing against the 49ers and feeling pride of beating them, but we'll see what happens. I think I'm gonna pick the Bears, just because I think this might be the week where Caleb Williams really shows up. But again, if he has another 3 interception game, really start to wonder. I mean, he's shown a great connection between him and Adunze already. Him and the connection between him and DJ Moore is getting better. But again, if that offensive line can't stop the Rams' passing attack for as mid-tier as it is, it's going to be a long day for Chicago. But I'm going to pick the Bears to win in a relatively low-scoring game, 17-14. But I mean, again, the Bears lose. Questions for Caleb Williams continue to pile up. Next, Pittsburgh and Indianapolis. Pittsburgh coming off another win last week against the Chargers where they really dominated. Their defense was absolutely dominant last week. The Chargers could not get anything going. Dobbins had only 45 rushing yards. Herbert re-injured that foot, I believe, so that definitely put a damper on things. And once he was injured, they really had no chance to win. Passing attack got going a little bit better. Now, I'm not going to say that Fields is the next best thing, but he has shown so far that maybe the Bears made a mistake. Maybe they should have just upgraded that offensive line and kept Justin Fields, but we know that was never going to happen. You know, the Bears are always quick to pick the next best thing instead of staying with what they have and just building on that. Now, I'm not saying, like I said, Fields is not the greatest quarterback ever, but if you build around him, he can be a pretty serviceable quarterback, maybe even above average. He's probably not going to be the best in the league, but he's shown at the very least that he looks pretty decent when you have a team around him, a decent offensive line, a great rushing attack, and a great defense to match. Now, the Bears supposedly had that last year, but didn't show up at times. But the Colts coming out that big win last week against the Bears. I mean, both of those teams tried to lose it last week, so pretty much Jonathan Taylor helped really decide that game because Anthony Richardson was throwing the ball around like candy too, and not in a good way. I mean, he made some truly dreadful throws. For as big of an arm as Anthony Richardson is supposed to have, his play choice is not always the best, and he makes bad decisions all the time. Their defense is not great, but they have started to show some good moves. The way Atuatu's finally starting to find his form, and they're getting interceptions. even though the Bears were giving it away last week. I think it's going to be another low-scoring game, and it sucks, especially if you have Jonathan Taylor in fantasy. Although I still think Jonathan Taylor will have a decent game this week. I mean, he's been pretty lights out for most of the year, and I don't think the Steelers are going to slow him down too much, but enough to maybe make a difference. Again, this comes down to the turnover battle. If Anthony Richardson can avoid the dumb interceptions that he has been throwing, they have a shot to win. But if Anthony Richardson plays like last week, they're going to lose. They're just going to lose because the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is too good. Their pass rush is too good, and their secondary is one of the best in the league. They just look fantastic. They're going all over the place. TJ Watt is on a tear, and Colts offensive line better be ready. Otherwise, TJ Watt is going to eat them alive all day. But in the end, the Steelers are going to go 4-0. Who would have thought that at the beginning of the year, that the Steelers would be 4-0? In the end, I think it's going to be 20-17. Again, a relatively low-scoring game, just because the Pittsburgh offense is a little limited at times, and the Pittsburgh defense is really good at stopping other teams. So it's going to be a close game, but in the end, Pittsburgh goes 4-0, and Anthony Richardson will continue to look for answers as to why he makes bad throws. It just comes down to him. He needs to stop making the bad throws. Next. Denver and the Jets. Interesting game. Yeah, maybe a little bit. The Jets, Aaron Rodgers looks back. He looks great. Oh, yes, he was playing against the Patriots, but the Patriots supposedly have a great defense. Just their offense is just so dreadful. The Denver Broncos just showing up out of nowhere, stopping Tampa Bay, and maybe Tampa Bay just isn't as good as everybody thought they were. Their defense hasn't been great, specifically Tampa Bay, but Denver's defense really showed up last week, and Patrick Surtain could shut down another wide receiver this week in Garrett Wilson. Of course, he'll be going up against their best wide receiver, and I think Denver, again, might have a chance to win this game. Now, if they can get to Aaron Rodgers, they might have a decent chance. The Jets, their offense has been pretty darn good for the most part this year. The running game is starting to get going a little bit more. Aaron Rodgers looks close to his old MVP stuff, at least last week. I mean, it was the first time ever in an NFL game where a quarterback was 6 for 6 throwing passes outside the pocket, which is incredible. This never happened. It is a weird stat, but it's something like, really? No, of all the mobile quarterbacks we've seen, no one ever had that, and it's old Aaron Rodgers at 41 years old that made that happen. Makes you think. But again, it's going to be a relatively close game. A lot of the games this week I see being relatively close, well-matched games. I think most of the teams playing each other this week look pretty good. And Denver, no, I'm going to go with the Jets. Jets win 24-17, but hey, if Bo Nix can play like he did last week, he still has a shot in this week. And again, it will only be his 4th game, so I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon of everybody saying Bo Nix is terrible. Bo Nix is terrible. But I mean, he's got to bring it like he did last week. And if he can, Denver has a chance to win. But right now, because of that ferocious defense that the Jets have and the way Aaron Rodgers has been playing, Jets win in a relatively close game, 24-17. Next. Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. Philadelphia coming off that tough, gritty performance last week against the Saints. Saquon Barkley had a great game last week. Jalen Hurts did not have the best game. Had a couple of really bad throws. Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield, again, didn't have a great game last week. Mike Evans was shut down. Now, I don't see anybody in Philly shutting down Mike Evans this week. I think Mike Evans will have a decent bounce-back game, especially if Chris Godwin is feeling a little under the weather, feeling a little injured. But for Tampa Bay, when they have those two guys on the field, magical things happen. They didn't happen last week because Mike Evans was largely shut down, but still, Godwin had a pretty decent week last week, all things considered. Their running game has not been great. Rashad White has not been able to get going like at all. Now back to Philly. Jalen Hurts is going to need to have a bounce back game. I think he will, considering how not great Tampa Bay's defense has been. Pretty mid tier for most of the season, and they really shit the bed last week. I think, again, this should be a relatively close game, but I think Philly pulls away and wins 27-17, something like that. 27-20. Again, relatively close game. I think this will kind of be more of a shootout than last week, and not too many great shutdown guys on the other side shutting down the other team. So I think points will be flying this week more so for both teams. Both teams had terrible outcomes last week, or terrible outputs last week. So I like them to increase the scoring total for both of them. But in the end, Philadelphia wins, and Tampa Bay will be 2-2. And all that great start that people were talking about, like, what really happened there? Were they actually as good as people say, or not? Next, Cincinnati and Carolina. Interesting game. Who would have thought at this point Cincinnati would be 0-3, Carolina would be 1-2. Carolina looked like a completely different team last week, and this might be an indictment on Bryce Young. I don't know how you could say it otherwise. I mean, it's the same team, same playbook, and look at the difference between Andy Dalton and Bryce Young. Just night and day comparison. Andy Dalton had like the best quarterback week last week. At nowhere over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. He looked fantastic. He was dropping dimes all over the field against a supposedly great Raiders front. Cincinnati played better last week. Jamar Chase showed up. Joe Burrow showed up, but her defense just has not been good. They haven't been great. Their offensive line has been improving for sure. And again, like I said, I think I said this in the beginning of the year, I think Chase Brown will find himself in kind of a lead role, or more of a split role. I mean, Zach Moss has been the lead back for the season, but Chase Brown last week was starting to eat into his carries a little bit, and he looked a lot better, to be honest. Now, if he can do that, maybe they can really make an adjustment. Higgins still hasn't really gotten going all that much. But again, their defense for Cincinnati has been their Achilles heel. They haven't been able to stop really anybody, and Jaden Daniels made them look like fools for most of the game last week. Carolina, I think, has a decent chance to win. I just can't see, again, last week I said I can't see Cincinnati going 1-3, but I really can't see them going 0-4. I mean, I think their season might already be over, because there's like maybe a handful of teams that have ever made it to the playoffs starting at 0-3, and I don't think any of them have ever won it. So Cincinnati wins begrudgingly 24-21. But again, if Carolina wins, I don't know what to say. Carolina, I mean, if Andy Dalton shows up like last week, it's going to be a long day for Cincinnati, and Cincinnati could very well end up 0-4. That would be very bad for Joe Burrow. Next, Jags and Houston. Houston is going to bounce back in a huge way this week. Jacksonville's defense was terrible last week again, as it has been for most of the year. Trevor Lawrence continues to sink down further and further. It's a good thing he got his money, because who knows if we'll ever see another big contract in the NFL the way it's going right now. Nothing has worked. The rushing game has not been the same. ETN he has not been the same ETN we've seen over the past couple of years. I don't know what happened to them. Their offensive line has been great, and especially their defense just got torched, got picked and knifed apart last week by the Bills. I mean, the Bills just absolutely tore them apart limb from limb, and I see a similar game this week. After the absolute embarrassment Houston went through against Minnesota last week, look for Houston to come out big. Look for C.J. Stroud to have close to 400 yards passing and 3 or 4 touchdowns. Nico Collins will be back. Stephon Diggs will be back, even though, let's be honest, I think it's trying to come to fruition that Stephon Diggs is a cancer, and will work negatively against CJ Stroud. Rushing attack should be able to get going. Hopefully Mixon is able to play. Who knows what's going to happen there. It's obvious Cam Akers isn't all that great. He was clearly stopped by Minnesota last week for most of the day. I really don't see Jacksonville having any chance to win. It is in Houston, so Houston's going to come out. That crowd is going to be rocking. I think Houston wins 35-14. And I don't even know if Jacksonville scores that much. They've just been bad. And sadly, Doug Peterson is going to find himself looking for a new job next year. Next. Another interesting game, Washington and Arizona. Arizona didn't look too great last week. They had many chances to win, but the Lions just were the better team all last week. Washington with a big win on Monday night. Jaden Daniels looking far further along than Caleb Williams in terms of offensive rookie of the year competition. He's starting to make better throws. He's not making a lot of mistakes, which is good. He's getting out of the pocket and making plays with his legs. He's finding more of a connection with Terry McLaurin, which is great. Terry McLaurin is just one of those guys. He's always out there doing good things. Find him, and good things will definitely happen. The rushing attack has been pretty good. Brian Robinson Jr. has had a pretty good year, all things considered. Offensive line has been decent. Defense probably hasn't been great. It's been middle, lower tier of the league, so definitely signs of improvement there. Arizona, Kyler looking to have a bounce back game this week. Marvin Harrison didn't do all that much, so hopefully he'll look to improve on and maybe have something similar to week 2. But I gotta be honest, I think Washington wins. I think Washington wins this game. I think it's gonna be again another close game. 27-24. I just think Washington's playing with a lot of mojo right now. I'm not saying they're going to win their division because I still think it's the Eagles to win right now. But, hey, Jaden Daniels has been playing great. And I don't know what Dan has going on there, but they're looking like a better team. And I think Washington wins this one. Although one X factor for Arizona is if James Conner can get going like he was earlier in the season, Arizona could whittle them down and pull off the win. So it's not an upset win by any means, Washington winning, or wouldn't be an upset win with Arizona winning, but James Conner can really be a big X factor for them this week. So look for him to have a big bounce back game in a big way. Next. New England and San Francisco. I'm going to keep this short. New England's not going to win this game. San Francisco should bounce back after the absolute embarrassment they had last week. I mean, Jawan Jennings had like 8 catches for under 75 yards and 3 touchdowns, and they still lost. How does that happen? New England has been bad. It's reverting to the New England that we all thought we were going to see all this year. Drake May, please be the starter. I know their offensive line is bad, but see what he can do, because you're just not going to improve as a franchise if you keep throwing Jacoby Brissett out there. Jacoby Brissett is just not great. And sure, it doesn't help that offensive line is not great either, but come on. He has not been good. Drake May is obviously the better choice. Put him out there. I'm sure he can make more plays than Jacoby Brissett can. I'm sorry. I've been on the soapbox a lot the past couple of weeks, but Jacoby Brissett needs to be out there. Drake May needs to be out there. Sorry for your need slip. But San Francisco should get their running game going this week. I like Brock Purdy to have another big week again. But I don't see any chance for New England to win. But for some reason, if New England does, you really start to wonder about San Francisco. San Francisco's 1-2. Who would have thought San Francisco will be 1-2? Sure, they're very injured. But they're still the San Francisco 49ers. They still have a pretty darn good team, even without Debo and Christian McCaffrey. They should be able to make more plays than what they did last week. They should not have given that game away. So I think San Francisco comes down in a decent way, winning 27-10. 24-10. But it should be somewhat close game early on, but San Francisco pulls away and wins in a big way. Next. Cleveland and Las Vegas. Las Vegas getting absolutely embarrassed last week. Cleveland getting embarrassed as well. So both of these teams looking for big bounce back wins. Cleveland's offense has been up and down, up and down. Deshaun Watson is just kind of a disgrace, even though allegedly, he's never been charged in the court of law. Let's just say that there. But he's just not the quarterback that he was, and he'll never get to where he was 5 years ago. It's just not going to happen. Las Vegas, I don't know what happened last week. Who knows who's going to be the quarterback this week, because Gardner Minshew wasn't great last week. They kind of threw in Aiden O'Connell at the end just to see what they could get, and they were able to get some points. But both teams are bad. Both teams are just bad. Even though Las Vegas has some great players on defense, it's just not enough. Max Crosby's just not enough to win the defensive battle by himself. Deshaun Watson is just not good, like I said. I don't know who to pick in this game. I'll go with Las Vegas to win. I don't feel overly confident about it either way. Frankly, both these teams are as boring as can possibly be because their offenses are both really bad. This is definitely a game to skip this week and just make your pick and move on and hope you get it right. It's just a really hard one to pick. I really don't know which way to go. It's really a toss-up because both teams are just not very good. I'm going to pick Las Vegas to win 24-21. I don't know. Who knows? That might be too high for both of them. Who knows? It remains to be seen. But Las Vegas wins, I guess. And there you go. Next. Kansas City and the Chargers. And these two usually give each other good games. Kansas City 3-0. Los Angeles 2-1. The Chargers are looking to have a big bounce back on the running game. And then I think they will have a decent game this week. Justin Herbert, who knows how injured he is. Hopefully he is able to go. Patrick Mahomes hasn't been great for the Chiefs this year. He's made plays enough to get them to win, but why Patrick Mahomes is in the MVP competition right now, I don't know. I know it's still early to even be contemplating MVPs, but you know how the NFL media is. They're going to push that as early as possible. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes is nowhere near the top of the MVP competition so far. He's at like 4 or 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He hasn't been great. He's just not looked the same. Travis Kelce has been like on the worst start of his career. Running game is just nothing there. We'll see if Kareem Hunt is going to be elevated this week. We'll see if he needs some more time to get going. Carson Steele wasn't terrible, but he wasn't the greatest either. The Chiefs made enough plays to win, even though the refs probably helped them out. The Chargers defense has been pretty solid for the most part. Their offense is just it's charged by the running game. If their running game can get going, they have a decent shot to win. But when all said and done, I think Kansas City still wins. They go to 4-0. It's really hard to pick against the Chiefs right now because of that ref caveat, but it should be a relatively close game. I'm going to go 23-20. Relatively close game. Maybe Kansas City wins again on a last-minute field goal, and Chargers are back to 2-2. But still, with a decent shot, considering how bad the AFC has been so far this year, with a decent shot at a wild card spot at the end of the year. Next, in what could be the game of the week, the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens coming off that win against the Cowboys, even though they tried everything to give it away. The Buffalo Bills looking like one of the best teams in the league right now, 3-0, absolutely decimating the Jaguars last week. I mean, the Jags had no shot to win, absolutely none whatsoever. Buffalo, I think, will continue that this week because the Baltimore Ravens defense, while they have been able to make some plays here and there, largely have been very ineffective. They've been getting torn apart by passing games left and right for the most part, and Their rushing attack has not been what it actually has. Derrick Henry has been pretty darn solid for the most part. Um, it all come down again. It all come down to the defensive side of the ball. With the way the Bills have been playing, they've been playing great. They've lost so many defensive players over the offseason, but yet they still continue to show up. Now, they might not be the best fantasy defense, but as in terms of NFL defense, making stops, causing turnovers, they've been pretty darn good. And Josh Allen, he's the real at the top of the MVP list. No matter how early it is, he's looked the best. He hasn't had any interceptions, knock on wood, only one fumble, and he's had like 9 touchdowns. He's been absolutely fantastic. And this could be the year for him to finally win MVP. And if Buffalo really wants to make a statement this week, go into Baltimore, beat the Ravens, and go up to 4-0. The Ravens will be 1-3. The Chiefs, yes, they're still undefeated. Gotta keep it going with Kansas City, because ultimately I know the Bills have lost to the Chiefs in Buffalo and in Kansas City in the playoffs, but again, if Buffalo's at home in the playoffs, I still think they stand a much better chance of winning than playing in Kansas City. Lamar Jackson just needs to be more consistent. He had a pretty decent game last week, but should have been a lot more for sure. Nearly gave that game away at the end for sure. So it's going to be a close match again. Bills win 30-27. But yeah, I just think the Bills are the best team right now. And as long as they keep firing on all cylinders, the Ravens are not going to win, and they're going to be 1-3. Then questions will have to be asked. How long will John Harbaugh continue to be coach of the Baltimore Ravens? It remains to be seen. I think they should move on from him eventually, or pretty soon. It's not that he's not a good coach. It's just that you can only have the same message for so long before it gets stale, and a new message needs to come in for a team. Just needs to happen. Just the way of the world. I know the Steelers refuse to admit to that and to keep Tomlin around, but Buffalo wins in a big way, and they'll be 4-0. Next. Tennessee versus Miami, our first of the 2 Monday night games. Boy, what another uninteresting game. The Dolphins are just not the same without Tua. That offense just does not perform well. Who's going to be the quarterback this week remains to be seen. I doubt it that Skylar Thompson will be able to play, but who knows? You would think with that offense that any quarterback would be able to come in and make it work, but just haven't. Hopefully Devon Achane can get the running game going, and I think they will. I know Tennessee's defense has been pretty good this year, all things considered, but they've been worn down because the offense hasn't been able to stay on the field. Will Levis could have a big game this week because Miami's defense hasn't been great, but if he continues to give the ball away like he has, Miami's going to win this pretty handily. But it's in Miami. Man, again, if Miami had Tua, this game would definitely be a blowout for sure. But it's not. It's going to be relatively close, 14-17. And even then, I don't know what the score will be. It's not a very interesting game with the players being out that they are. And the Tennessee Titans just really aren't that interesting of a team overall right now. Will Levis is just giving games away left and right. As long as he continues to do so, Tennessee Titans are not going to win. So Miami wins in a close one in a boring stinker of a game for the first game on Monday Night Football. Next. And last but not least, Seattle and Detroit. One of the best games of the week for sure. Seattle 3-0, Detroit 2-1. I think this is a game where Detroit really gets off. I know I've seen on websites saying like, oh, Seattle's had like the best defense in the league, but who have they played? Who have they really played to warrant, such a status? I mean, they really haven't played anybody really, to be honest. Detroit looking to get off to Schneid. They did win last week, but it wasn't the most convincing game in the world. Well, actually it was. Their defense was pretty darn dominant over Arizona last week. They gave up some points, but really, it was never really in doubt. At least for the Lions, tight end is okay. Sam Laporta looks to be okay. Avoided really serious injury after being carted off. Again, like I said, offense for Detroit is going to go off this week. Geno Smith will still be able to find DK Metcalf down the field for sure. We'll see if Kenny Walker is able to go, but I would assume we can continue to see Zach Charbonnet running the ball and doing what he does best. But in the end, Detroit wins. It's in Detroit, so I think that gives them the edge. Detroit wins 28-24. It's going to be a relatively close game, but I think Goff gets off and stops throwing interception, has a big passing game, or the condom of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs continues to shine, and the Detroit Lions go to 3-1, and we'll have one less undefeated team in the NFL. But those are the picks of the week. The video on the Packers versus the Vikings will be coming out tomorrow on Friday, so look forward to that. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know what you're thinking about how the games will go. But otherwise, have a great day. And as always, God bless and go Pack Go.